Hello. Today we're going to take a look at how to convert a spool file to Excel using SpoolFlex. I'm going to be using a J.D. Edwards R83500 report, but it doesn't really matter as long as it's an SCS spool file generated by your application on the IBM I-Series or AS400, then SpoolFlex will work just fine. Well, let's take a look at this. First of all, I'm going to go to a command line and I'll type in SFlex, S-F-L-E-X, to get to the main screen of the SpoolFlex software. And once here, I'm going to go into the Manage Spool File screen. Now, if you're running on version 6.1 or later, you can also call our commands from a work spool file command or from a workout queue screen. So you can do that, but I'm going to just show you using our software today. So from this screen, I'm going to locate the spool file that I want. This is the J.D. Edwards report I was telling you about. To get a good idea of the report, you can view it and see what it looks like this way. But better yet, what I do is I put a C on it to convert. I'm going to convert it to PDF so I can view the entire spool file on my screen. And give it a moment. You notice it popped right up. That's an option you have with SpoolFlex, to just open the report right on your screen. And with a PDF like this, I can see the entire report. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll through. The first thing I want to do is I want to look at my column headings. That's this area right here. What I want to see is do they bounce up and down, or are they stationary? The reason for that is because SpoolFlex will ask you to identify where your column headings are, because we allow you to format column heading, report heading, and detail differently. If you want to only include the column heading information on page 1, you can. If you only want to include the detail of the report, you can do that, and it's up to you. So you have total control over that. So I'm going to page through this, and I see that my headings stay put, which is good. But SpoolFlex can accommodate it if it floats too. The other thing I want to look for is just to kind of get a general idea of how closely the data is squished together. Because we're going to tell the software to run an analysis that looks for a certain number of blank spaces. Since we're going to strip out dashes, that won't really matter. But what does matter is how closely the data is packed together. So for example, if I come down here to page 5, you'll see here that this data is only separated in some spots by 1 space. So we're going to tell the software when it runs its analysis to look for spaces of 1 and convert the report accordingly. So when I come back to my green screen, I'm going to now convert it to a spreadsheet. So I'm going to put a C on it again, but this time I'll choose Excel. It doesn't really matter what I name it, because for this purpose, I'm just bringing the file up on my screen. But you can give it an intelligent name, or if you use an output definition, the output definition can pull variables to intelligently name the file and intelligently archive it in the location you want to put it. When I hit enter, unlike the PDF, it's going to ask me one more line of information. And if you remember, it's asking me where my column headings are located. And since I'm viewing the spool file down below, I can either key in the line number 7 and say that it repeats twice, or I could also just use the F7 key and put it on the heading and hit F7, and it'll actually mark it and change the value up here. The second thing I'm telling the software is that I'm looking for a minimum number of 1 space, and that's going to be where I begin and end the columns. So it's going to look at this data down here, and every time it sees a single space, as it does right there, that will be the end of column A. This would be column B, etc., etc. When I hit enter, the software is now going to convert that spool file to an Excel spreadsheet. Now, this won't work for all reports. This report is pretty clean, and it will convert nicely with these options I've selected. However, if you have a more complicated report, you may want to use output definition, which lets you store formatting options. And you can see this report turned out pretty nice. The columns are correctly lined up. Negative numbers are correctly formatted. Although it did separate the percentage sign into a different column, that's okay. I'm not too concerned about it. But hey, it's a lot better than having to key this in manually. Am I right? Okay. Let's jump back to our green screen and let's see. Well, if I wanted to add some more pizzazz, maybe I want to add some formatting with color, maybe I want to add naming convention, things like that. I can create an output definition. Right from the screen, I can hit F9, and that will take me, the default is output definition. Think of an output definition like a template that you can set up for a report. You set it up one time. You can use it over and over again. I've got one that I've already created. We'll just take a look at it. JDE. You can see I've got a few of them set up in here, and I'm going to edit this one. The first thing it asks me is what output type do I want, and you can choose from a variety of different output types with SpoolFlex. PDF, Excel, CSV. Some companies claim to output to Excel and they only output CSV or text files. That doesn't offer any formatting, and it doesn't do much for your being able to control your headings or anything like that. So beware when somebody says they can output to Excel, are they really just saying you can output a CSV file? Well, we can even output other print files, Word document, etc., etc. I'm going to choose Excel, of course, and hit Enter. Now here, I can pull data from the spool file itself off the spool page. I can use spool file and job variables to name the report. So in other words, I'm going to pull the spool file name followed by the date the spool file was generated dynamically. So every time I run this report, it's going to have a different name. And in this case, since I'm running it several times throughout the day, I'm also using sequential numbers. I can also use those same kind of variables to archive them into specific folders that I want. Now, if you remember, when we converted to Excel previously, I viewed the spool file and I highlighted it. We're going to do that again. And what I'm going to do is hit F10 to view the spool file, put a V on it to view. And again, using the F7 key, I find my column heading and I highlight it. Using the F7 to highlight and F8 to end highlighting. When I hit Enter, it's going to pull those character strings into the software. So it now knows where my column headings are. Big deal. What does that matter? Again, we can exclude column headings if you want. Sometimes the column heading is repeated throughout a 300-page report. Well, you don't want that. So our software can exclude that, which is a very powerful feature which some other solutions don't support very well. Now, if you recall, we told the software it's going to run an analysis. The analysis is looking at simultaneously the heading and the detail for a minimum of one blank space in both of those. Now, you can choose from several different kinds of analyses, which I'm not going to go into the different types today, but the most powerful is our star visual, which you can literally view the spool file, put your cursor where you want the column to begin and hit F7, put your cursor where you want each column to end, hit F8, and that visually marks where it is going to appear. Now, if I hit Enter, this definition is finished. However, we do have more options. F8 gives me quite a few more options. In fact, I'll just select a few of these. One of the things I'm doing is I'm going to tell the software I want to change it from portrait to landscape. I'm going to tell it I want to freeze the rows. If I want, I can tell it to magnify so that it automatically opens up on my desktop at 110%. I'm also telling it that I want to include the column headings and report headings once on the first page. I can tell it to exclude them completely if I want. I'm going to exclude detail lines, dashes, underscores, asterisks, things that you see in RPG program output that you don't need in a spreadsheet. If I want to, I can tell it to go through and exclude entire lines based on some value. So if I can tell it exclude any line that contains the word total, it'll take all those out of the report. I'm also going to tell it that I want to go column by column and change the formatting. I may change the justification. I can change the word wrap. I can even tell it to automatically highlight negative numbers in red. Thank you, Windows. I'm also telling it that I want to change something where the percentages were. If you remember, they were split. I'm going to tell the software to make that area a little bit wider, kind of like an umbrella, so it doesn't see a blank space underneath it, and that will combine my percentages and the value in the same cell. One thing I didn't show you was the color, which is really cool because I can tell the software to change my column headings to a different color, but I can also do dynamic coloring. I'm telling this to say, highlight my total lines, highlight different lines based on variables in the spool file, and you can highlight them different ways. You can even do a coloring highlighting based on conditional values, so you can compare one cell to another and highlight it if it's greater than or equal to or less than or something like that. So you have a lot of really cool formatting options. Again, all of these are options, not meaning to confuse you with complexity, but it just makes it that much more powerful. When I go to email, for example, I'll just copy this one, and I'm going to use now the definition. If I was going to email, I would use the definition as well, obviously, and I'm going to position to my J.D. Edwards, and I'll select it and hit enter. And I have it set to view after converting. So again, it's going to just open it up on my screen. But it's also going to save it wherever I have defined it to save in the output definition in the archive location. Now watch here as it populates that same report now in color. Now that's quite a difference, as you can see. It's highlighted the column headings as I wanted. Total lines are highlighted. Negative numbers are highlighted in red automatically. It even did some bold based on some variables that I set up there. Notice that my headings are locked in place. So I've got a pretty nice looking report. This is going to thrill your finance people, I promise you. After what they've been going through to contact IT to manually convert these into Excel, this is a vast improvement. It's going to allow your finance people to do it on their own, or you can set up automated processes that will handle this conversion for you. If you ever need assistance setting up an output definition, our support staff here provides unlimited support. They can even create the output definition for you and send it to you as a save file, and using menu-driven options, you can restore it on your system. There's no additional charge. As long as you're under maintenance, that's free. You can call in as often as you need to. Of course, you're probably going to want to learn how to do it on your own, and we're happy to help you when we do that. We also have online library available and quick start guides, and of course, this incredible recorded overview that should give you a better understanding on how you can convert your spool files to Excel. If you have any questions, please give us a call. We're happy to help. Our number is 866-378-3366, or shoot an email to support@drvtech.com. Thanks for joining us for this overview. Good luck with your Excel conversions.